Yoo-hoo. Okay, so recording started. What will happen right now? I will just go into my PowerPoint and then we start the show. If anything pops up in the meantime, maybe technical issues, feel free to send me a chat message. So this is the best way to communicate and will not disturb our talking. Okay. So if everything goes right, you should see my PowerPoint with the title Introduction to Mobility DCAT-AP. And is also the first agenda item for today. Okay, so this is the agenda. And as I said, I will welcome you now, and then I will do the first minutes. I will talk about the background and goals of this product, Mobility DCAT-AP. So it's a beginner seminar. It's our very first seminar. So for all of you who have not heard about this term, Mobility DCAT-AP, you are at the right place. Good, huh? And then we have some colleagues, which I will introduce step by step, from Italy, Denmark, Netherlands, and Belgium, who are collaborating with us on this Mobility DCAT-AP. So we will have some more deep diving there. And in the end, I will have at least 20 minutes reserved for you, for your questions, for our answers, hopefully, and everything that pops out on your mind. So now it's 10:07, and let's get started. So who are we? Yeah, you have seen some logos on the slide before. There's something called NAPCORE. There's something called Mobility DCAT-AP. A lot of acronyms. So what are we talking about? NAPCORE, the first letters stand for NAPs, National Access Points. So here we are in a mobility community. So persons and organizations dealing with mobility data and exchanging such data. In Europe, if you don't know, such exchange is usually facilitated via national access points, NAPs. You see some logos on this map. So there are some NAPs, or many NAPs already operational. Most of the countries, they have something even outside the EU. So this is the major infrastructure for exchanging mobility data, connecting data suppliers, users, supporting ITS. ITS stands for Intelligent Transport Systems. And it is all thing is mandated by the European Union by some legislature, namely the ITS directive. So I think you might know some of those terms, of those portals and NAPs listed here on the map. And as you might imagine, every time in Europe, when things pop up, they are not always harmonized. So there's something called NAPCORE. NAPCORE is a project, it's an EU-funded project that tries to harmonize and coordinate those NAPs. So we have some money and some resources, partners who are working on the EU-wide coordination of NAPs, working on interoperability, mostly by data exchange standards and formats, looking for strategic items like the backbone for ITS, infrastructure, and some more strategical topics like vision creations and so on. So many things done by NAPCORE, very interesting project. And NAPCORE is also taking care of metadata, which is part of this session today. So for those of you who don't know what metadata is, basically when you open any kind of data portal, it might be open data or mobility data, you will see a GUI like this, where you can see data sets and data offers, and they are usually described by various items and elements. Usually there is a data publisher. Here in the screen, you see the NAP from Germany. So I have some data found about parking. This data has been offered by Swarco, a private company, and there are different items telling me the story behind this data set. So we see a category, and we see mode of transport, we see network coverage. So these are metadata which more or less mobility related, but other metadata are generic, so something like the title or the category, the publisher. So classic metadata that you might know from your everyday business. This is the German example. When you look at other examples, and I'm not showing you the Belgian one, it looks kind of similar, but not really. So those colleagues from Belgium, they're using tags to describe their data set. So this is something we don't do very much in Germany, but it's also a very common way to do so. So keywords or tags are usually used inside metadata. So here you see some tags about rail car, so key terms describing data set. And our goal here is to find some match, some consistency and harmonization for metadata across NAPs. Why? We would like to have data search easier, maybe via agreed keywords. So not every country will use something own. And we would like to have metadata more interoperable. So why don't we exchange metadata across different NAPs or platforms? This is so far not really possible, at least for the mobility domain. And exposing metadata to a wider data ecosystem. So one idea was, why is Google search not able to find individual datasets on NAPs? So this is something that is not possible yet because the crawling by Google doesn't work well. So we have to look into more some other technical solutions. So altogether, this is why we work on a proper specification for metadata exchange. And there are many data standards, metadata standards, and you can look up those lists, and there's a lot of going on in the metadata community. However, for Europe, especially for open data in Europe, we have a de facto standard, which probably, hopefully, many of you know. So what is the de facto standard for metadata in Europe? It's here on the screen. DCAT-AP. The latest release is 3.0.0. You can look it up. So it's a major elaboration by the European Commission. There's a so-called SAMIC community behind. I will have one co-speaker from this community later on, so you will learn a little more about DCAT-AP, but this was our baseline, because this is like the major infrastructure how to describe metadata in Europe. However, this is more for open data or more for generic metadata. So what many people and organizations are doing is to take this baseline DCAT-AP and try to elaborate a little more specifications for that. So we call this extensions. So there's one for the German open data community with the .de suffix. This is one specific extension. There's another one for the geo and spatial colleagues, geo DCAT-AP, and many more. So you will find a landscape of extensions for DCAT-AP. And when we did our analysis, we found, oh, there's not really something for the mobility people. So we thought, why is it missing? So there were some experimental ones, but not really on a major level. So we thought, let's go this way. Let's work on an extension for mobility. And guess what? What's the title for here? Mobility DCAT-AP. So we just follow the same path and take the prefix mobility. This is the term, our brand, and our logo. Before we did this work, we tried to do a more conceptual thinking. So our basic question is, how do we describe mobility data? So very often, there are different aspects that come from any other data. So when you see this little taxonomy, you might have something like ownership. So this is something that has nothing to do with mobility as such, but there are other aspects that are more mobility related. For example, for content information, so in mobility, we have very specific data categories, maybe roadwork information, fueling, gas stations, parking. So there are different terms and wordings for mobility data that are more or less classified already. And let's see the data formats. Very often there's a data model and data standard behind this. Also very specific to mobility. So DATAX is a very big data standard. So all those terms and acronyms could be captured via metadata. So we had a look at this kind of background conceptual thinking. We call this a conceptual model. So before we started mobilityDCAT-AP, we did a lot of preparatory actions, which you have to do whenever you do a new data model. So we did requirement analysis, we did a roadmap, we did a conceptual modeling, we did some mapping to existing DCAT-AP works. So we spent some months here. You can see the link and you can download all the preparatory materials. Also, we thought we should not do our isolated work. We should be in very close contact with the DCAT-AP SAMIC persons and people. They were very helpful with that. So we had an intensified exchange and consulting and advice from those colleagues. Thank you very much if you're here on the call. And last year, this was our big party, big bang. We had our first release of the official mobilityDCAT-AP version 1. It's now online. It looks like this. You can see a respec documentation online. Now we are in the version 1.0.1. It's a complete documentation, as you will see for other DCAT-AP specifications, including the human readable documentation as seen here on the slide, but there's also machine readable files like a shackle and so on. And there's a wiki page in the background. We will talk about this hosting and collaboration later. There's a UML model because every model has a UML model. So we did something here. It's all on a respec page. And what we also did, we tried to reuse as much as possible existing RDF vocabulary. So this is very helpful advice when you do extensions, not to reinvent the wheel. So for quality info, which is a new topic for us, we found there's already something cool on the web called data quality vocabulary. So we try to reuse as much as possible from this other vocabulary into our work. And how does this be deployed? So we will have a deployment session during the webinar today. But in practice, I think the most obvious way to explain this all, this is another GUI similar to the first one shown. Metadata on a initial access point can be all described via mobilityDCAT-AP elements. So you can see the GUI in the background, and in the green fields, you see the mobilityDCAT-AP representation as properties. So you see some namespaces from DCT. We are reusing some other vocabularies here. DCAT is shown here as a namespace, but there's also the namespace mobilityDCAT-AP. So we have new properties invented, our own namespace. For example, DATAX2, data standard, we have something called the mobility data standard because we thought we need to have a specific item describing data standards in mobility. So all those items are now described very specifically, accurately. And this is how this is deployed. So you can download all this metadata in a machine readable format via APIs, for example. Okay, ongoing tasks. So we will learn this later. Governance, maintenance, user support. So you are here with the user support action. The wiki page is there, the webinars, and we do bilateral consulting. So if you need help, you can reach out. And there will be a proof of concept later this year, some sort of a metadata aggregator, which I'm very excited about. But we will explain this in another webinar because it's not there yet. So one question that probably will pop up, how do we collaborate with the other DCAT-AP derivatives? So of course, we are in touch. We are following the other works. And the idea is here that one dataset called here dataset D1 can be represented via different DCAT or DCAT-AP derivatives. But of course, there are some overlaps, but there are also some questions, issues that have to be discussed. But this is how this is done in the DCAT-AP domain. So there are webinars, there are issues, there's the GitHub to make this all as much as harmonized as possible. So alignment with other domains is the title here. And this was all from my side. I would like to leave floor to other persons here working with us. So I have the agenda again here. What will happen in the next minutes are 4 short presentations, deep diving in that mobility DCAT-AP concept. So first of all, we will learn about how the mobility DCAT-AP is hosted and how persons and organizations, including you, can collaborate. So we did a lot of work to make this happen. And a colleague of mine, Mr. Mario Scroccia from the Sheffield Institute, which belongs to the Politecnico in Milano from Italy, he will tell us how the hosting and collaboration is accomplished. So I will now leave floor to Mr. Scroccia, and Mario, you are free to take over the screen and tell us more about the hosting and collaboration. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Peter. Hi, everyone. So let's see. I can share the screen. Okay. So as Peter presented, I will talk mainly about the hosting and collaboration for mobility DCAT-AP. So let me skip. So what we mean with hosting and collaboration. So first of all, hosting is about where you can find all the resources that are needed to adopt and use mobility DCAT-AP. And the second point is about collaboration. So how you can contribute or ask questions about the specification. So to present the hosting, I need to discuss some concepts related to GitHub. Probably if you are more technical, you already know this website. GitHub is a service that allows to host repositories for online collaboration. It is especially used for software development, but as Peter presented, there are other metadata specifications like DCAT-AP that already leverage this tool for publishing and hosting these specifications. So GitHub allows to host versioned files, so it's really useful if you would like to go back at previous versions or check the changelog of certain files. And this is enabled by the Git distributed version control system. But also it offers these GitHub pages that basically enable the online publication of the web pages that are hosted by a repository. Last but not least, it gives the possibility of defining a wiki, so some documentation, additional documentation that may be associated with the content of a repository. But without further ado, let's check what we have for mobility DCAT-AP. First thing, we define a GitHub organization. So an organization on GitHub that you can find the link mentioned here. That basically is a group that allows to manage repositories, so content, but also users. So we can assign different roles to different users for each repository that is associated with the specification. And if you click on this link, you find a very nice summary of the main content that is hosted by within this organization. The main repository that we have within the organization is the one about the specification, and this is the link. And let's see what's inside. So first of all, we have some artifacts. These artifacts are different representations or different elements that represent the specification or should be used for its adoption. So we have a machine readable serialization in RDF format of the properties and classes introduced by mobilityDCAT-AP, and these are available in different RDF formats. And we have also shackle shapes. Shackle shapes are sort of mechanism that allows you to validate your metadata. So this is something that maybe we can present in more details in a more advanced webinar, but allows you to check if the metadata that you generated are compliant with the specification. And then we have the main content. So what is, let's say, the initial point of access to the specification, that is the HTML documentation. So in this repository, you can find both the previous version, so the version release, where you can check also previous version of the specifications. We also have the draft specification that represents the version that is currently under discussion, but that is still to be released. And of course, you have the final stable release, that is what is currently released as to be used. Regarding hosting, we have to mention also another important topic, that is the one of controlled vocabularies. So as Peter mentioned before, we would like to agree not only on the metadata properties, but we are also interested in defining a set of values that should be used for these properties that should be the same, because this really enables the standardization of the metadata and improves the findability of datasets that have the same value for the same property. So within mobilityDCAT-AP, we define also some controlled vocabularies that are specific for the transport domain that we consider. And also these controlled vocabularies are hosted within the mobilityDCAT-AP organizations. So you can see here as an example, a fixed list of transport modes. This is the list of transport modes that is made available by the mobilityDCAT-AP transport mode controlled vocabulary. And these are the values that should be used as value of the mobilityDCAT-AP transport mode property. In total, we define 11 controlled vocabularies, and these controlled vocabularies are defined using the SCOS recommendation. All these vocabularies are also made available in a separate repository, and you can find the link here. And within this repository, you find all the artifacts associated with the 11 controlled vocabularies. Last but not least, as I anticipated before, we also have a wiki. So a wiki is additional documentation. So it's not the main specification, but it collects a set of frequently asked questions or let's say doubts and answers that we believe can be useful for people interested in knowing more about the specification. So if you do not find an answer within the specification, please first thing check also the wiki. The wiki is reachable from the mobilityDCAT-AP repository. You see in the bar above there is a wiki button, but we also put a link directly in the specification. So also in the specification there is a section that has a link to reach the GitHub wiki. So the next point that we would like to discuss briefly is that hosting is not the same as publication. So hosting is where the files are, but then when you have to publish a specification or an ontology, you would like to have like a persistent identifier, because maybe you would like to move the content, so the artifacts at a different location, but you don't want to lose the pointer to these documents. So what we did was to select a persistent identifier using the W3ID service. That is the one that you can see here below. And this enables the possibility of accessing both the specification and the controlled vocabularies, even if at some point we have to move this content at the different location. And here are all the links that may be useful for you. So on the left, there are the ones regarding the specification, when you can see how to access a specific version, the latest release, the draft release, and also previous draft versions. And on the right, you can find all the links to reach the documentation of the 11 controlled vocabularies that I mentioned before. The last argument that I would like to discuss now is how to collaborate. So we really hope that you will help us in assessing the specification, adopting the specification, and we believe that it is important to collect feedback from people that will use the specification. This can be done using the two repositories that I mentioned before, and now I will show you how. So first of all, this slide is a summary of all the things that I already said. So you can find all the material for the specification in the mobilityDCAT-AP repository. You can find here the serializations, the wiki, and this is the repository that is selected for any questions regarding the specification as a whole. The second repository is the one about the controlled vocabularies, is focused on the controlled vocabularies. So this one has all the material related to that vocabularies and should be used for any maintenance activity related specifically to one or more controlled vocabularies. How to interact, so how to let us know if you have some questions or some doubts about the specification, some feedback. There is this mechanism that is called GitHub issues that allows you to explain what is your feedback. In particular, you can propose, for example, a use case that is currently not covered by the specification, or you can send us a feedback about an issue in the specification or some typos even. You can go on GitHub. You can click on the right, as shown here in the slide, on new issues. And there you can then compile, let's say, a form where you can write, let's say, your feedback. What is important is that this is all documented, it's openly available, so everyone can check also the issues. So please check if there is no already an issue that is about the same topic that you would like to raise. There is also the possibility of interacting, so it's like forum in the sense that everyone can react to an issue, propose their feedback, and also, more importantly, we as a NAPCORE will discuss this issue during every meeting in the following months. So this will be, of course, prioritized and organized and discussed, and will be taken into account for the next releases of mobilityDCAT-AP. But I think Heather will talk about it more later on. And finally, I would like to point out to this very important repository, I believe, that is the list of adopters of mobilityDCAT-AP. So we created this repository as a way of putting together people that are working with or on the specification. And we would like to create awareness about the specification, but also to help potential new adopters in finding already implemented examples to start from. So we are collecting NAPs that are already working with mobilityDCAT-AP, and hopefully soon we will have also links to portals that already implemented it, so that people that are interested can check these examples, maybe download sample of metadata using mobilityDCAT-AP, and maybe also contact other partners that already implemented the specification that can help them in proceeding further. And that's all. So as Peter said, we will have a final Q&A question at the end, but if you have already some questions, feel free to write in the chat and we'll check it later.
Grazie, Mario. Very nice. So this is the invitation to the audience to have a look at this GitHub repository. So there are more than one. And to collaborate. So the issue button is very important because this is how the main way to communicate with us and make this mobilityDCAT-AP better. So feel free to join the GitHub. Next on my agenda, we will learn how the entire specification can be put in practice. So we thought that a metadata specification should be going into the practical path as soon as possible. So we will have more maturity, we will have experiences, and we will have a real life deployment of mobilityDCAT-AP. And we are lucky that some of our NAP colleagues are in the process of upgrading their systems. And while upgrading this, it's a good opportunity to change the metadata infrastructure. And of course, we recommend using mobilityDCAT-AP here. One of those implementations is happening in Denmark. So I will now invite Mr. Kenneth Sorensen. He works for the Way Directorate, the Road Administration in Denmark, and those colleagues are also hosting and implementing the NAP from Denmark. And we will now get some insights and some background information how the mobilityDCAT-AP is now considered in implementing the NAP. So Kenneth, I will now give up to you, and the next 15 minutes are for you, and let's learn about the Danish approach. Okay, we can see your screen, but I cannot hear your voice.
You can hear me now?
Now I can hear you well. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Okay, so I will tell about the implementation of DCAT-AP in Denmark. And as Peter said, I'm from the Danish Road Directory, which is responsible for the Danish roads in Denmark. And I'm the product owner of our national access point here in Denmark. Our goal was to implement the new metadata standard mobilityDCAT-AP, and simultaneously we took the opportunity to redesign our metadata entry page. Our previous metadata was called Coordinated Metadata Catalog for NAPs, which was recommended by the European Commission at the time. I will briefly give you a presentation of the different steps in our journey to implement the new metadata standard and designing our new metadata entry page. And afterwards, I will explain every step further. I've had little to none experience with metadata, so we had to begin from the scratch when we started. But we started out with having a UX design workshop where we made a design sprint, and this we did to have some sketches of how we imagine our new metadata entry page to be. Then we dived into the mobilityDCAT-AP, and it was to understand the metadata model better. And then we made an Excel sheet with all our data fields and which kind of properties we wanted in our model, deciding on which fields. And then we made a mock-up agreeing on the design of our design sprint. And then we made a PowerPoint to tie the solutions together, the Excel sheets and the mock-ups, so you could see what kind of fields was in our UI. And then we started developing by giving all the materials to our developers that made user stories from this so they could start developing. And lastly, we tested our product to see if it was the right output that we have made. So we started out with this internal UX workshop within our organization where we conducted a modified design sprint with the goal of generating ideas of how our new metadata entry site should appear. This workshop was successful because we ended up with some good design concepts, and we got a better alignment among our stakeholders of the output. Then we dived into the DCAT-AP into the model to understand the metadata standard, its structure, and the vocabulary it's employed. Once again, having the wiki page that was mentioned earlier, with all the explanation of the model, was very helpful. It helped us understanding the underlying metadata standard and its vocabulary, which was crucial for effective implementation. And here again, the mobilityDCAT wiki page was a good friend. In step 3, we created a table listing in Excel, listing the properties that we needed. Our previous model was the coordinated metadata catalog, and fortunately there was a mapping table available on the mobilityDCAT-AP wiki page that we could use. Then we began transferring the table into an Excel spreadsheet and then added some of our own fields. Our philosophy for making this metadata model was to minimize the number of fields for data owners to input, because we believe that having fewer fields increases the likelihood of accurate data. And naturally, it goes without saying that we didn't took any properties that were mandatory and made them optional, but we discussed which optional properties from the metadata standard should become mandatory for our organization and which should remain optional. An example, the property rights holder was on the obligation level recommended, but we made it mandatory for our model because our data governance already said that we wanted this role in our organization. So for each property, we have documented its name and as it appears in our user interface, as you can see, and whether it should be displayed in our new UI and how we physically wanted to implement it. In step 4, we made a mock-up. We took the sketches from the workshop in step 1 and looked at our Excel sheet, and we then created mock-ups of how we wanted the new metadata entry page to look like. And we used Figma as our mock-up tool because Figma allowed us to make these realistic clickable mock-ups. In step 5, we used PowerPoint to tie the Excel sheets and the mock-up together, and because we want to illustrate where the different properties in our Excel sheets was placed in the mock-up. This helped our developers to ensure that no properties were overlooked in the mock-up, which was a good help. And then we started developing. Our developers created user stories based on our material, which included the Excel sheet, the PowerPoint presentation, and the mock-up. We, of course, used knowledge from the mobilityDCAT-AP wiki page to ensure alignment, and this collaborative effort allowed us to agree on what we needed to be done. We followed a waterfall approach for our project because we had a clear vision of what we wanted the end to look like. From breaking down the project into user stories, it took only 8 weeks until we went live with our new metadata entry page, which in our organization is pretty fast. And step 7, we tested our new metadata model, and we used we tested the UI through test cases and to see how it worked, and then we used the shackle files from the wiki page again, which was developed by the mobilityDCAT-AP group to test if the model delivered the right output that we wanted. Yes, so the mix of this having a table in Excel and our mock-up and the PowerPoint was good to align our project team with the developers, and I think it was the key to having our implementation going relatively fast. The mobilityDCAT-AP was also a key factor for us to understand how it was built up, and because here our developers could find the shackle files and the minimum profile in XML files that helped them test if the metadata model output was correct. And we have made a migration of the old metadata, but we have some new fields, and here we have chosen to make a mass notification out to our data owners that they have some new metadata they need to update. Yes, that was my presentation of our journey. And if you have any comments or questions, you are welcome to reach me out in LinkedIn.
Wow, Kenneth, great job. So a few behind the scenes into IT development and user experience and platform implementation. So I'm very thankful that the Danish colleagues are taking this on. We learn a lot from this. Yeah, I see some first chat. So there will be one thing from Stefan de Koning, which we'll talk about later on. So it's about use cases for metadata exchange. And the comment from Daniel Kalaschik is a very nice transition to the next speaker, because the question here is how to align any deployments with revisions of mobilityDCAT-AP. And talking about revisions, of course, we do have a governance concept, because any data model or metadata model needs to be maintained and governed, because as you have seen there's a GitHub repository, there's already a follow-up version 101, and there will be other versions. So the whole governance needs to be laid down in a concept. My colleague Ed Oms from the National Data Warehouse in Utrecht, the Netherlands, he took care of this conceptual work. So we have now a finalized governance concept written down, which we will now deploy. And Ed will tell us how the governance is put in practice. So Ed, yeah, it's your turn. Please tell us more.
Okay, thank you, Peter. I will just share my screen. Let's try. Yes, if that's okay, you can see my screen at the moment. Okay, I will talk about the governance and maintenance of the mobilityDCAT-AP in a few minutes, next minutes, and I will give you an overview about how it's organized and how we think about we should organize the governance and maintenance of the mobilityDCAT-AP. First, I will, as Mario mentioned, there are two products of the our sub-working group 4.4 of NAPCORE, which are the mobilityDCAT-AP specification, what is talked about a lot at the moment, and a set of controlled vocabularies, as Mario mentioned, and each has an own independent GitHub repository with separate updates and a freedom to use the different versions. So it's possible to use the mobilityDCAT-AP specification 101 and use at the same time in control vocabulary, which is still at 1.00. So it's you can use them as a mix of different versions. It's possible to use them. About issue handling during the project lifetime of NAPCORE and until the end of the year, and then I think it will be a NAPCORE X next to it. Our sub-working group will take care of other issues. So in May, this if any issues on the mobilityDCAT-AP, the sub-working group which have developed the mobilityDCAT-AP will take care of the issues which are following which are there. And after NAPCORE the project is ended, there has to be another governance or maintenance organization, but that has to be concretized yet. We don't know how to do it then. About the issue submission, as Mario mentioned, you can mention your issues on the mobilityDCAT GitHub repository, and for the control vocabulary, you can use the repository for that. So on the GitHub, you can place your issues. Some examples of issues. For example, some remarks or problems about the mobilityDCAT-AP releases. If something is not clear or something is not working, so that's an issue. If you have some new functionalities for future releases, then you can mention it. If you have some proposals for changing the data model, you can propose it. And if you have some proposals for changing the control vocabulary, you can also mention it on GitHub. And after that is mentioned, then the issues are discussed at the regular sub-working group meetings, who are every 2 months. And if you're not part of the sub-working group at the moment, then and you have submitted a issue, then you will be invited for a meeting where it will be discussed. And each one of the everyone can also propose a solution. So also the submitter of a member of the sub-working group of everybody who is looking at the GitHub and reading the issues can propose a solution for the issue, and then the decision about the issue will be made by the attendees of the meeting, and this will be by consensus. And decisions are documented on GitHub. So on GitHub, if it's then you can follow the whole story and the whole issue from start to the decision. There are two ways of making consensus for minor issues, and minor issues I will talk later on what minor are. They will be proposed in advance of a sub-workgroup meeting and presented during the meeting. And if there's a solution, it will be accepted after 2 weeks of the meeting if there's no opposition. So mainly during the meeting or afterwards on GitHub, there will be discussion, and if everybody agrees with a solution, it will be there after 2 weeks. For major issues, there will be voting during the sub-working group meeting, and normally we use a 2/3 majority of the attendees to accept the issue. Of the solution for the issue, and this the same way as the DCAT-AP community is working. So we try to follow the most of the DCAT-AP community in this. For the releases, there are bug fixes. Well, still little corrections or errors or inconsistencies in the specifications. They do not affect operability, and they will be released every 6 months in April and October. So in October, last October, the 1.0.0 version of mobilityDCAT was released, and last April we released the 1.0.1 version of the mobilityDCAT-AP. And bug fixes are minor changes. So this will be fixed on GitHub or in discussion, but there is no big voting meeting needed for that. Then there are some minor semantic changes. They may affect interoperability of the mobilityDCAT-AP, but not in a disruptive way. So for example, should be addition of optional properties or deprecation of unused optional properties, or this is what means if you have a new property which should be optional in the mobilityDCAT-AP, it will issued as a minor change. And these ones are published every year in October. So I make a typo, but it's published every year in October. So, and the major changes for which we will vote in the meetings have some serious consequences for interoperability. So there are properties who are used in some NAPs, or they are mandatory. So it's more difficult to change them because they have impact on the implementation of the mobilityDCAT-AP. And this one will be published every 2 years in October. Finally, I will tell you something about the versioning, and the bug fix releases will give a new version to the mobilityDCAT-AP, what's the third number, will change. So it will change from 100 to 101, 102, etc. The minor change releases will change the middle number. So and from 10 to 110 and 120, etc. And on the major semantic releases will change the first number. So that's our all new releases and new big versions. So this in a overview the way we take care of the governance and the issue release of mobilityDCAT-AP. And for now, I will thank you for this. And if you have any questions, we can talk about it later. Thank you.
All right. Yeah. So the questions are already coming. I will make sure that they will be answered in the last Q&A session. So I see Tiffany Flemings from the European Commission is very active. So thanks, Tiffany. And I see some questions to Kenneth. So you have some homework to answer those. Let's do it later. As you can see here, we have a big community. And people are here in the call, which we never met. And this is the first benefit of this webinar. So we're opening up our little working group to outsiders. So everyone who is interested into mobilityDCAT-AP and into the future hosting of it is more than welcome to join us. So a very good blueprint for such collaborations has been proved by the DCAT-AP and SAMIC colleagues. So as I said at the beginning, DCAT-AP is our super specification, which we take as a baseline. And when you have a look at this, there are many ways to collaborate, to communicate, and to get advice from those colleagues. They have webinars, they have GitHub, they have a lot of online resources, and we really appreciate that. And I really take this as a best practice how to make a data specification be more interactive and be accepted by the communities. And Bert van Nuffelen is part of this game. He is working for the Digital Flanderen Agency in Belgium. He is a data interoperability expert, and he is one of the most prominent persons in the DCAT-AP/SAMIC community. So maybe you know him. And if you don't know him, he will tell you more about his job and the DCAT-AP role in this context.
Thank you, Peter. So I hope you see my screen. So I'm speaking on behalf of the SAMIC community, where I will give you a short introduction to what DCAT-AP does in this area of its role of cross data space data sharing, because as you already mentioned before, Peter, to the community, is that mobilityDCAT-AP is one of the domains. And this is, therefore, we have to look how to do this in the cross-domain area. And
sorry, but Bert, you muted yourself.
Sorry, it's good. Now you should be hearing better.
Yes.
So if you don't know SAMIC, so SAMIC is the Semantic Interoperability Community from Interpol Europe, DCAT, and in there we bring the whole community together to work around interoperable specifications through pilots and to share this knowledge through information, knowledge hub, etc. So this is our activity, and what we work core on, and this is the core where everything starts from, is on the hand core vocabularies, which are kind of person, location, business and organization, and certain application profiles, and in this case, mainly DCAT-AP. And this is the work where everything is we're working on. So coming back to our challenge and to nowadays in this big notion of data spaces, if you look to that, then you see there's everywhere in each data space a discussion ongoing on how to share data. And if you take an even broader step back, then you will see that there's a need for how to share data across data spaces. Because we want to make all the data interoperable and interconnected. And in that, a lot of agreements have to be made at how to exchange them technically, which solutions, how to bring them together, to what kind of organizations are there, and what is the data behind and being shared. So all these kind of agreements have to be made, and those agreements have to be shared. And this is where DCAT-AP comes into the picture. So the metadata, as introduced in the beginning of the webinar, this is a layer where you can express how a data set has its shape, what is the evolution of it, how it is being shared. And what we do with DCAT-AP is to bring a European-wide specification that forms a set of constraints in a unified way, so that we have a broad cross-domain overview of what is the metadata description of those data sets. And this we want to do in such a way that this is for each domain fair and can be interactive, and in some way have a number of freedoms into it, sufficient freedom. And this is the picture I already saw earlier on, and this is important to know, because if you look from your own domain, you can say, okay, this is a data set and I have these rules and so on. But often your data set is not only being used or viewed in one perspective of mobility DCAT-AP, but it is as well open data, originally DCAT-AP on that, but it's maybe as well high value data sets falling under that regulation, or it is geospatial data. And you want to offer a support to your publishers of those data sets that they have to do actually a once-only effort for describing those data sets. A little bit extra for the mobility, a little bit extra for the high-value data sets, and just bring this together in one coherent story for those publishers. That's the focus what we want to take into account with DCAT-AP nowadays way more. So as it is, and said, so DCAT-AP is a growing and ever-growing ecosystem of metadata descriptions. It started 15 years back with a focus on open data and having open data portals being connected. But nowadays it has grown way beyond that with the data spaces. We have mobility as today, but health is as well coming soon with their first release of their specification. But we had as well some original earlier on data space alike or specifications like geospatial and statistical data. We have today the high value data sets annex for DCAT-AP, but there's as well looking into towards a little bit more technical areas like machine learning, algorithms, how they deal with data, and how we can bring that knowledge as well to the whole community. And what we do for this, we have a lot of webinars. So I think I didn't count them yet, but I think we had since September about 7 or 8 webinars on DCAT-AP or variants of it, so which is quite intense. We try to interconnect the communities like here. So we bring and we try to bridge two domains, but as well to the international community with W3C, with other, let's say, more research-oriented communities like the machine learning community. So we try to as well to play a role in the crossing the communities and the organizations that support that inside the Commission and the member states. And in that area, we saw that there's more and more need for support for creating profiles. What are the good guidelines for creating data specifications? And we took a higher step back from all our experience with the whole community, how we built our core vocabularies, how we built DCAT-AP, and we brought that into a style guide to make and to assist the community in creating profiles or new core vocabularies, so that this becomes more a coherent story. So this bringing this experience together and writing this out. And as well, and this is then more on the technical level, we try to bridge towards the technical. We do not implement as such, but we assist in there. And what is typically is we try to look what needs publishers where we can offer from the specification side for publishers to assist in their publishing activities, and for the portals what to do, how to implement, and so on. I will give you some more details on the ongoing activities in the next slides. So what is today the status? I'm not going to explain DCAT-AP as such. You have to read the whole specification, and mobility DCAT-AP is a good starting point. But if you take the level a bit more abstract, you will see a similar specification. And today we have DCAT-AP 3. So Peter already showed that there was a public review. We are actually in the end phase now to announce the full release of it, which is aligned with W3C DCAT 3. And the main change, the main motivation from DCAT 2 to DCAT 3 is the introduction of dataset series. So this we discussed a lot in the working group on DCAT-AP on dataset series to try to find some good guidelines, but today it is left open a bit more to gathering the experience, so you can use dataset series in a quite flexible and open way, and we will see based on the experience that we bring from all the communities together if there's additional guidelines needed to be written in. What you have to know is that DCAT-AP 2 to DCAT-AP 3 is a major editorial update, so it looks different. There's a lot of changes into it, so it's a really major version from the experience as well. And then we did an alignment with our CEMIC style guides, which happened in the parallel. Today, we are working on the geospatial data. So with the community, there have been already 3 webinars up there, and there's an upcoming webinar next week on 10 o'clock. And that's where we are revising GeoDCAT-AP 2 to GeoDCAT-AP 3 to be aligned with DCAT-AP 3. And you're still welcome to give your feedback to it, but at the moment, what we see is that most of the topics will be kind of a natural alignment of what has happened in DCAT-AP 3 to be applied in GeoDCAT-AP 3. There are a minor number of changes that are slightly differences. If you have interest in the more machine learning aspect and discussion, there was as well a webinar on it, but here you find as well the link to the specification. So what I want to give this perspective of this creating the specifications. So I mentioned already that we have this style guide, and this is answering the big question that saying what are the rules to create good interoperable data specifications. And this experience, we want to formalize this. This is our style guide, and it will give you a way to express your own local member states mobility DCAT-APs or other specifications. And what we identified is there are different ways of reuse. You can reuse terms as is, as they are defined in the reused vocabulary, or with substantial changes, with semantical adaptations. And in the middle, there's some gray zone where you have some smaller change, wordings, scoping a little bit smaller. And this is what we call terminological changes. And for each of them, we give some advice how to deal with that. So what is the effect on the specification building? And the goal is to create an overall coherent data specification so that the shackle shapes are coherent with the HTML and the RDF that is associated and so on, with an eye of external reusable data specification so that it is easier to build a new sub-profile or reused vocabulary out of it. So this is the ambition with the CEMEC style guides, to bring that together. Nevertheless, with the CEMEC style guides, if we look to DCAT-AP, there are some few elements that for DCAT-AP needed to be more specialized. And what we did is to create a set of profile alignment principles, which we discussed in January with the community. And in there, of course, there's the similar questions, but we try to answer them with a DCAT-AP context. So how you indicate that properties of one class can apply to another class, how you deal with that, how to indicate that properties have conflicting constraints, how you do with this, how you can see that one profile is coherent with another profile, and what are these changes, and so on. So there are a lot of questions that you might have from a mobility DCAT-AP or your national profile to the mobility DCAT-AP into DCAT-AP. As one of the questions in the chat, to see what are the changes in there and how to what you have to do. So our proposal are 5 sets proposal at the moment, but still they can evolve over time. For instance, the table of code list, that's something that we will discuss in the next webinar of DCAT-AP. So what are those principles? We start with something that we have expressed in the past front, but now we do it, that DCAT-AP is a master profile and you should adhere to all the constraints into it. Where there is conflict, then we recommend to use sub-properties. We have some diagram alignments with this HTML, meaning that if you see in the diagrams, in the UML diagrams, subclass arrows, that you mean that you adopt all those constraints from the superclass, so that you really see it like that. To address where things are being reduced, we propose to indicate this reuse with an extra column or an extra indication. And where there are local scopes, and that is sometimes it might be needed, you cannot make an extra document, but have a small local scope, then we recommend to use additional classes. But as you see, there's still some assessment and to see the experience on this, but these are kind of the first principles we try to work on. Giving to support, the shackle shapes have been mentioned already for the mobility DCAT-AP. We do this as well for DCAT-AP. You have an online validator that you can validate, and this is based on the interoperability testbed. And you have to know in your local community, if you think you can use the interoperability testbed as well for yourself to set up your local mobility DCAT-AP validator. So this is open source. There's support from that community, and you can create your own, for instance, Danish mobility DCAT-AP validator. So this is possible to set up and to have an outside view validation service for your community. And finally, I would like to draw to some very recent activity, a pilot and activity that we do, is as well looking on how to share the data itself and what are the possibilities into it. And there's this specification called linked data event streams. And this is a rather new kid on the block in the linked data community, which describes a stream of data in linked data format. And this idea has been applied to DCAT-AP to create a first draft of what could be a DCAT-AP feed, so that we can create some standardization in the harvesting ecosystem. There has been a pilot done with the Open Data Portal of Sweden, and that was quite successful. And the Data Europa.eu, so the big portal at Europe, is as well implementing a connector for this one. So to have this standardization as well on sharing DCAT-AP data, so that incrementally new data can go from one portal to another portal. So we as well do some activities on this. And as Peter already mentioned earlier on, there's a lot of support that we can offer at from CEMIC in the different communities, just from providing documentation and pointers up to being, like for instance in GeoDCAT-AP, the main co-author and co-organizing all the events around that specification. So if you have need into that, you can as well come to us and see how we can contribute in various ways. And that was it for my side. I just want to invite you as well to the CEMIC conference in Brussels on the 27th of June. So if you want more of semantics data specifications, DCAT-AP, and more other things, you can register over there.
Oh wow, Bert. So many news, even for me. So a lot of things are going on in the background of DCAT-AP. So feel free to reach out, check those online resources, and to get in touch with those colleagues and those experts. And as I said, this was a blueprint and yeah, baseline for our works. So now for the remaining 15 minutes, I would like to give floor to you people here in the call. So I think there has been enough input from my side and from our European colleagues. I have seen some first yeah, questions here in the call. So what we might do, I would like to give floor first of all to Stefan de Konning. Stefan, I think your comment here in the chat is very interesting because you are already explaining potential use cases of metadata exchange in the mobility domain, and I completely agree what you have said. So I think it's more a comment, not a question, but do you want to add something to this, Stefan?
There is one potential thing that I may ask about this. So the persons that have developed this mobility DCAT-AP is something like they created a new meta standard for this. And I wonder if any of people of this group have considered existing, let's say, content standards that can be used as input for this metadata extraction. So for example, put a NetX file into a converter, get the metadata out of that file and be able to publish the URL and the, let's say, the properties of that content. And if that is the case, then it is obvious that if you are a public transport operator, you can create your own metadata, and therefore the national access point can fetch your URL and your metadata and add this information to their national access point, and the European access point get the metadata from the national access point. So I wonder how much effort was put into the discovery of existing standards so that the whole wheel can roll instead of doing it backwards, as in you understand what I ask?
I do. I hope the others do as well. So we have content data, we have metadata. So far, those two words are pretty much separated. However, there are various hints that those two, let's say, planets should come together. So there's the idea to digest metadata from content data, which can be done for NATEX. It can be also done for DTEX. So many of the metadata information is embedded in content data feeds. And there are some thoughts and conceptual ideas how to make this happen, but it's only in the conceptual phase, but it's on our agenda, Stefan. So we will make sure that we will have more intense talks on that. But it's ongoing work. Okay, so this was the appetizer from Stefan's work. Stefan is, by the way, more from the multimodal world, as you can see. However, yeah, there have been some more comments or more technical questions towards Kenneth. I see one expectation formulated by Tiffany Flemings that, of course, we have to go outside the NAPCORE community. So this is why we are here in this web call. And of course, we do a lot of dissemination works to reach out, and because mobility data are also happening outside NAPCORE, outside even Europe. So we already have established contacts here and there. Jessica Becker, wow, good, very good question, and I have no answer for that. How do you ensure quality correctness of entered data? So this has to do with quality management of an national access point, and I know maybe I will give this back to Kenneth. I remember there's some sort of a quality check or some sort of a validation cycle for your metadata entries. Is it correct?
Yes, on the fields we have like that they have to be filled out, and it has to be some of our data entry fields follows the control vocabularies. Example, I think it's what's called frequency. It's a control vocabulary that you can choose from. So in that way, we are ensuring that people are filling out the correct entered data. And then we have explanation of every field. We have a information button that you can click on and see what is the meaning that you're going to fill out here. And then we are right now trying to make a video that guides you through the entering of the data, so you can see an example of how you should entering the data and what kind of data should be entered.
Yeah. So quality control of metadata is in our agenda, and this is a best practice from Denmark. We will make sure that we will elaborate some recommendations how to ensure this. So Jessica, yeah, there will be more, let's say, written aspects on quality control. It's on our agenda as well. As you say, see here, many things are covered, but they are not, let's say, formulated to the last %. So many things are discussed and will be condensed in a later stage. So NAPCORE as a project might end, but there will be, of course, opportunities to reach out and to intensify many of those works. And I really appreciate that we have one guest here from the DG Move, which is Tiffany Flemings, and I know that DG Move is not only financing our work, which we also appreciate, but they give us some, let's say, spiritual support, because they would like to have mobilityDCAT-AP exposed and put in practice wherever possible. So Tiffany, thanks again, and you see her last comment. So Tiffany, anything to add from your side?
No. Peter, thank you for giving me the floor for this. I really think that the DCAT-AP is a very crucial, very essential and a key element for making sure that the national access point will be interoperable throughout Europe. So, and as we see that one of the tasks in NAPCORE is to clarify which data is available in the various national access points, and it's very hard to collect this information, even when you're within the project NAPCORE, and it's already very hard to collect this information. So when you're outside NAPCORE and you're just a user of a national access point and you want to know what is available and what is out there, it's very hard to get an overview. So I think this is very crucial to be deployed in national access points throughout Europe. But indeed, I think the answer of Ed is already there. I think there should be an outreach to other access points, not necessarily national access points for in the sense of the ITS directive, but other access points who already also have mobility data available, maybe from a smaller set, or just a little bit connected to the data that's already there on national access point. And I think there should be an outreach there to make sure that they are aware of this standard, and that they at some point hopefully implement the standard as well, so that there will be, this could be one of the building blocks for a European data space for mobility, I would say. The other question, I would suggest, since NAPCORE is already working on a follow-up of NAPCORE, that this outreach is one of the tasks that is really, being made concrete in the next phase. My other question was more to Kenneth, because I'm happy to learn that you already deployed the DCAT-AP in the Danish National Access Point, and I was just wondering, what was the key element of coming to that decision? It's I can assume because you already have something. The metadata catalog that was already in place. That at some point you come to the decision that update. But what was the key factor to do so? And the other question related to that is: do you have any insights on what that more or less costs? So that we have an idea for other national access points to see, okay, the investment is substantial, or it's it's doable, or it's feasible. So not really a number, but just an estimate, I would say. Thank you for having the floor, Peter.
Well, yeah, I can tell that that the main reason is that we want to be a part of this harmonization of the NAP, so that mobility data can be used in all of Europe. And if I should mention, I know that you said I shouldn't mention a number, but we had 450 developing hours, and then I think we have maybe a half of that in the hours before, or maybe the same, but I'm not sure on that number.
Okay, thank you.
Cool. Yeah, what else? So yeah, again, it's your remaining minutes, dear audience. So anything to be raised, to be asked? I'm just checking the chat, but seems that many things have been already discussed. If not, you can also reach out via, remember, GitHub, or also by our personal emails. So if there's nothing else left, maybe a little outlook for the last 3 minutes. I'm really happy that this happened. So this was our first public outreach to the outer world. So I'm very thankful that we have almost 100 persons here in the call, many people who are new in the scene. So very nice to see you here. And I hope this is only a starting point. So there will be, of course, opportunities to connect to each other in the future. I will make sure that all of you get a link provided with download links for all the sessions today and the recording. There will be another webinar in October this year where we will probably have more practical experiences, some deep diving, so feel free to come back. And as I said, governance maintenance is ongoing. There will be follow-up versions coming up. So you will hear more from us. So we are here to stay, as I would say. Okay. Stating that, yeah, I would like to thank Mario, Kenneth, Ed, and Bert for your contributions. I haven't introduced my site. I'm Peter Lubrick. I work for BUST in Germany, the Federal Highway Research Institute. We do consulting research for our transport ministry, and we do EU projects. So we do lead NAPCORE, and I lead the Metadata Group in NAPCORE. And yeah, I'll be happy to stay in touch with all of you. If there's nothing else, this is your last chance to speak up. I would like to close this call. And thank you very much. And I wish you all the best. Have a nice rest of the day. And if you have a holiday tomorrow, as I do, have a relaxed holiday. So otherwise, I'll see you hopefully very soon. Take care, everybody, and bye-bye.
Bye. See you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.